I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 77 of the Speak My Peace podcast. As always, I'm your gracious, grateful, and thankful host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, I do hope that this episode is reaching you all in good health as we continue to battle this deadly coronavirus. This thing is not going away anytime soon. I hope that we are not of the mind state that it is. Despite the vaccine and things been out there, I do want to continue to wish you all good health. I know they said that, the second wave of the coronavirus is going to be one of the most deadly as well. And that is holding true. I know during the second wave, this has been my first experience of knowing people who are personally dealing with it. I know people who I'm very close to who have contracted the virus. Grateful that they are still here and their health is not diminishing. But the fact of the matter is they have contracted it. So I do hope that you all are still protecting yourself and taking the proper precautions to protect yourself and those around you, your loved ones, as we continue to battle this coronavirus. And with that being said, man, what a year it's been. I mean, it's been a wild ride of emotions. It's been a roller coaster of many different emotions that we as human beings have dealt with this entire year as a result of coronavirus and just being humans and experiencing life. First, we had to deal with like all the hardships. Like coronavirus in itself is the main story of the year 2020. It's the headline story. But outside of that, like we had to deal with hardships and stuff outside of the coronavirus that has affected our lives and will continue to affect our lives as we continue to go on. I think about death. I think about the financial hardships we had. I think about job securities. I think about how relevant mental health and dealing with mental health and battling mental health has become in the past couple of years. I think about the people who have suffered abuse at the hand of whether it's parents or at the hand of their domestic partners. And then we take all that into culmination. This is what we as humans deal with on a day-to-day basis, on a year-to-year basis, on a month-to-month basis, outside of this new normal with COVID. And then outside of that, we've had our fair share of deaths. I know I just mentioned it just now, but we had our fair share of deaths with icons and legends, people who we have grown to love, people we've seen grow up right in front of our eyes, people we've been fan of for most of our lives or most of their careers. We've seen a long list of people who have passed away this year, including but not limited to Kobe Bryant, his young daughter Gigi, and the 6 other mothers, fathers, daughters who were also passengers on a helicopter plane that crashed late January to start off this year. We think about John Thompson, the famous coach at Georgetown. We think about the Alex Trebek and all that he's done and the staple he played in many families. We think about Little Richard, the icon Little Richard. We think about the actress Naya Rivera. We think about the civil rights activist John Lewis, who has dedicated his life to the betterment of humans, not even just our people, humans, period. We think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who have taken on a similar fight. We think about the late actor Chadwick Boseman, who has portrayed many heroes in his own right on a movie screen. We think about Debo, or most know him personally as Tiny Lister. And then on top of that, we had a fair share of young rappers whose lives were also taken, headlined by Pop Smoke and King Von. We take that and the culmination of all of this. That's a long list of names, and that's not even half of the names. Before I started, recording this episode, I was looking at the list of all the people we lost, and there was a couple of them that I forgot, and it's a lot. As I said, this list was including but not limited to, which means that there's a vast majority of more people who names were left off the list. Not that they were forgotten. I'm just not about to read off every single name, but that was just celebrity deaths. And that was specifically actors, entertainers, or things like that, and musicians and athletes. And then there was a long list of young rappers whose lives were taken. And then aside from that list, we also have a list of people who, again, in early episodes, I definitely labeled them as martyrs, because I don't want to make it seem like their lives were lost or taken in vain. I want to big up these people, and I want to champion these people because their lives were lost for the betterment of our people. And those names, this list also is not limited to, but includes Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. The broadcasting of their deaths across social media, on television, and newspapers sparked a huge outrage of people fighting against social injustices in this country and around the world. And again, I call them martyrs because I don't want to make it seem like their lives were lost for nothing, and I don't want to seem like their lives were taken in vain. Their lives sparked a huge change and has sparked a huge movement for our people and people around this world. Just to stand up against police brutality, stand up against racism, stand up against inequality. Then, aside from all that, we had to deal with this deadly virus that so far to date has claimed nearly 2 million lives. 2 million lives within a 12-month span, more than 12 months, but I believe the first case in America was reported in either late February or early March. So it was really 9 months here domestically, but internationally it's been longer than 12 months. I'll say all that to say that 2 million in a less than 12-month span is a lot. 2 million in a 12-month span is a lot. 2 million in a 36-month span is a lot. But that's how many lives have been claimed by coronavirus. I know many people that still dispel the fact that coronavirus is real, still dispel the severity of coronavirus, and that's fine. Believe what you want, but the fact of the matter is lives are being lost, lives have been lost, health has been affected by this deadly virus, and that's how many we've lost to date so far. And unfortunately, we will lose more. I hate to say that, but that is the truth. And I say all that to say that even for the lives that weren't lost, like there's a lot of people that survived it. There's a lot of people who really didn't have like near-death experience with COVID, but their health will forever have that long-lasting effect or that residual effect of having to battle something so deadly as coronavirus. That's just the reality of where we are today. Aside from that, another side effect that coronavirus has caused was a lot of financial hardship. Businesses had to shut down. As a result of businesses shutting down, people lost their jobs, people got laid off, people got furloughed. And there weren't too many opportunities to go and look out for after being laid off from your job, because we're still in this pandemic and dealing with the staying at home and not wanting to risk your life just to get a job and things like that. Even beyond that, like losing a job, people have lost homes, and it's been so many things, all of these things that have occurred this year, from the deaths, the personal deaths that we deal with family, the deaths of our icons, and then having to battle this deadly virus. It was a culmination of many things that I'm 100% sure will be proven traumatic later down the road, if not already proven traumatic. And what I mean by that is I think that there will be residual mental health effects as a result of people dealing with just surviving this year, people dealing with coronavirus, people dealing with stay-at-home orders, I think there will be residual health effects as a result as well. And I think there will also be a residual insecurity in trusting jobs and such, and trusting the security of your source of employment or your place of employment, because of we've seen how many businesses handle this coronavirus, whether it was putting employees' health at risk, whether it was laying employees off because they just felt like they were expendable. There are many things that, as a result of this year, that we are going to have to deal with as people, that we just can't deal with right now because we're still going through it. A lot of homes were negatively affected. Like, that's not spoken about often. For the people who have, taken the proper precautions and have been staying at home, we've spent more time at home with the people who we occupy our homes with more than ever during the stay at home, because for one, we didn't have anywhere to go other than to do our essential, grocery shopping. And so as a result, we spent more time in one place with one person or two people or three people than we ever have before, or we ever have expected to. And as a result, a lot of homes were negatively affected, whether it was relationships being broken up, whether it was friendships being broken up, whether there was families affected. That is also a cause and effect of dealing with this coronavirus as well. We don't hear it spoken about often, but that is the truth. I've seen it. I've heard about it. And that is a prevalent and relevant thing while dealing with this. And I say all that to say that despite all these horrific things I just listed off, we're still here. We're still standing. Many of us are going to continue with life with lifelong bruises and bumps as a result of everything that happened in this year. But the fact of the matter is that we are here and we have survived this year. And that alone is something worth celebrating. That alone is something that we all should celebrate ourselves for, because we are here. As I said, there's many people that didn't make it this far. And so that there is enough to celebrate. So let me get a round of applause for that. Also, I think despite our efforts to go into the new year with the mentality of trying to leave this year behind, and having a mentality that it's a new year and 2020 is in the past, and that we're going to leave it in the past, things like that, because aside from this year, that's like a common mentality when going into a new year, and I don't think that will be the case for this year. 2020 is going to be a year that many people will never forget, just because of the negative effects just because of the negative things that have happened. I just said that, a couple of minutes ago, that I'm not going to be surprised that there are going to be facts proven about, the residual traumatic, effects that this year has caused on many. I'm not sure if it's a form of PTSD, but because I don't really extensively know what PTSD, because I've never dealt with it, I know what PTSD is. But just from me knowing people who deal with it and me knowing the definition of PTSD, I feel like many people mentally will deal with that to some form as a result of this year as well. Just because when you think about the losses that have occurred, when you think about the hardships that people have been put in, it's going to cause a lifelong effect to these people negatively. And so when you mention things like that, when you try to get past it, you can't really get past it. You can move on, but it's always going to be in the back of your head, and it's always going to be something that's going to have an effect on your life because it occurred and it put you through something that you never want to go through again, and it put you something that you've never been through before. And so we have to take that into mind as we move forward. Yes, we should move into the new year with that mentality of it's a new year and I'm going to improve and this year is going to be better than last year. I'm not saying don't do that, but I think it's going to be hard to try to forget about the year 2020 because for many, is going to be unforgettable. And I think that just because of the traumatic effects that many will never forget. And when we think about this and how bad this year was, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if this was the worst year for many people in their lives, whether old or young, just because of all that we've dealt with. I know that me personally, just get into the personal story for myself, that if you used to ask me, what the worst year of my life was, I can tell you. And I have two of them. I don't have one. And the reason why, and those years were 1999 and 2016. And the reason why those years were so bad for me is because there was a lot of changes occurring in those 2 years, whether it's physical, there was physical losses that occurred, whether there were spiritual losses that were occurred. There were losses that have occurred in both of those years that affected me, that will affect me, and has affected me for the rest of my life. Like 1999, I was so young then, and that it shouldn't really have an effect on me now. 21 years later, but it does. And the reality is that there were so much shifts in my life as a result of the losses that occurred within that year that I can pinpoint, certain things that happened to me in my life as a result of things that happened within that year. Same thing in 2016. There was so much loss within that year that I dealt with that it shaped me in a way internally and mentally that I know that the person I am now today in 2020 going to 2021 is part of me going through what I went through in 2016 and surviving that. And so I say all that to say that you don't forget what molds you into becoming a better person. I don't know that this year and the experience from this year is going to mold everyone into a better person. Some people may struggle with that improvement, but one thing is for sure that it had that effect. It's going to have that effect on many people to where they're never going to forget it because of what it cost them mentally, physically, and emotionally moving forward. And for that reason, we just can't go into the new year trying to forget about it. Our focus should be building ourselves up to prevent going through that ever again. Not going through, a worldwide pandemic, but going through the mental tolls, going through or dealing with the mental tolls that come with, dealing with a worldwide pandemic. We can only better ourselves to prepare ourselves in the future. Granted, I don't know if another worldwide pandemic will ever happen to us. I hope that it doesn't, but I think moving forward, we will be more prepared. We will be in places of employment to where we know that our jobs are secured. We will be in homes, apartments, condos, whatever you want to call it, to where we know that everything is intact. So that, when something like this happens and if we are to lose our jobs, that we will be prepared for it. Our mental states will be strong enough to withstand a 9-month stay-at-home order where we're not seeing our friends and our loved ones and not being out and about and traveling and doing the things that we enjoy that brings joy to our life. We will be able to improve ourselves if this was to ever happen again, if that makes any sense to any of you all. And I think one thing that was for sure about this year is just the outcome of each individual of this year and how they bounce back from this year. It's all about perspective. Because for a while, speak about that this may have been a worse year for many. On the other end of the spectrum, this may have been the greatest. It may have been it may have been a decent year for many. And so we have to always think about the saying, what you eat don't make me shit. And excuse my language, but that is the best way to sum that all up. What you eat does not make me shit. And that goes for every single person. What one person goes through does not affect what I go through. What I go through does not affect what another person go through. Everybody deal with things differently, and I think many of us, despite us all having to deal with the scarcity of coronavirus, we've all had different experiences with what has occurred within this pandemic in the past 9 months, and we have to keep that in mind as we go forward. Just because this was the worst year of your life, you shouldn't condemn someone for having a good year, or just because it was a good year, you shouldn't condemn someone because they had a bad year. It should be no shame, and it should be a celebration on both sides that we all survived it and that we're all here. If that makes any sense, I think during this pandemic and during this stay at home, many people grew in various ways, whether it was personally, mentally, health wise, physical health wise, financially, wherever the case was. A lot of people grew during this pandemic, whether that was opening up business ventures, whether that was scamming, whether that was getting married, whether that was bringing children into the world. Wherever the case may be, a lot of people grew during this pandemic. And again, that's when we go back to perspective. You may have lost a lot of things, and that's fine, because many people did, but a lot of people gained things through this year, and so they are grateful for those things. And so we have to just always just keep in mind perspective. Again, what you eat does not make me shit. And I'm sorry for cussing for 3 times. I shouldn't have been cussing that much, but that statement really sums up how we individually come out of this coronavirus. One thing that I've been seeing a lot on social media that I personally want to dispel is there's a notion that if you did not improve your financial situation during this pandemic, that you lost. Again, that's not true. It's not true at all. It's not true. It's not a half truth. It's not a quarter truth. It's just entirely not true. We should be celebrating surviving. We should be focusing on surviving, because many did not survive this year. And it's unfortunate, but that is the case. Whether it was due to coronavirus or it wasn't, there's many people that did not survive this year, and it was probably a higher toll this year than it was any prior year. And so that's what our focus should be. While many people may have, expanded their businesses, may have opened businesses, may have started families, may have, started a side gig and started hustling, may have become a social media influencer, whatever the case it may be, many didn't. And that's fine. For those who didn't, they made it to December 1st. They made it to December 31st. Or they're going to make it to December 31st. They will hopefully make it to January 1st. They will hopefully make it to January 31st. That is the victory. The victory is not what you think is a victory. So that notion of this year being surrounded by financial improvement or improving your financial situation is entirely not true, because many people were put in places and situations so where they have relied upon their place of employment for their security for so long that they had no idea that a pandemic can come and alter their situation within a week. You can't plan for that. You can accrue a savings. You can, pay your house off or pay off a car note just to make sure everything is straight. But you can't plan for a worldwide pandemic coming and you being furloughed for 5 months, or you being laid off within a week of the pandemic, hitting United States and things like that. You cannot. No one can plan like that. But as I said, going forward into next year, we can look forward to preventing things like that. We can look into jobs that may better protect us in the case of another deadly virus or worldwide virus coming around. That's what we can do to plan ahead. But you can't plan everything that has happened this year, because it was just a crazy year. I don't have a word for it. It was just a crazy year. But again, the focus for us and focus for this year should be on the fact that we have survived. And that there is good enough to go forward. That should be good enough to go forward. Personally, I'm grateful that I'm here, that I'm recording this podcast. I'm grateful that my health is intact. I'm grateful that, I've maintained my employment throughout this whole stay-at-home order. I'm grateful that I didn't lose any loved ones. All of these things, the culmination of all these things have made for a great year for me. And that's not to say that there wasn't any, bad parts of the year for me, because there definitely was some highs and some lows. But I think a culmination of everything that I just listed off, this year has been good to me, and I'm grateful for that. And that's not to gloat, and that's not to put it in someone's face, say, you had a bad year, but I had a great year, so who cares? That's not to say that. I'm grateful for the place that I'm in, and I'm grateful to be in a situation I'm in, because I understand how bad it can be, just hearing people testimonies of what this virus has done, seeing people testimony, whether it's people close to me, people I'm related to, close friends, whatever the case it may be. I'm grateful to not be in those situations. My heart goes out to people who were not in situations. Again, the purpose of this is not to gloat, but just going back to the thing about speaking about perspective, is that has what has made this year great for me. The year prior to that, when there was no pandemic, it wasn't, I remember, this time of the year, that year, it wasn't that great, because I was going through something mentally, because I was trying to find employment. And so that had affected me negatively, and it affected my outcome of that year. And as a result, this year has been much greater. So like, as I keep harping on, it's all about our perspective, and we should celebrate each other for surviving this year. That's what the focus should be: building each other up, celebrating each other, loving on each other, vocally or voicing to our loved ones and our close ones that we appreciate them and we love them, because that's what matters. If there's anything that we've learned this year, and not to be cliche, is that time is really of the essence, and that things can change in a snap. And we have to take that into mind. We have to take that into account moving forward, because this year has really proven that things can go from worse to worse in a matter of a week, and we can't plan for it. We can't plan for it. And aside from all that, another thing that I'm grateful for is just this podcast. This pandemic has allowed me to further delve into developing this podcast. I remember prior to the pandemic, I hadn't released the episode, or prior to the stay-at-home order in March, I hadn't released the episode of the podcast since the previous November. So from like that late November going into Thanksgiving up until March 15th, I had not released a podcast episode, just because I was transitioning, had just got a job, was trying to dictate my schedule and figure out my schedule, trying to culminate the fact that I had to commit to so many minutes or so many hours of my day at work, and then also commuting to work, and then coming home, and then also having the energy to release a weekly podcast, and then plan for the podcast leading up to it. And I really just didn't know how to navigate in doing so. And so while I did initially take the time off just to take the time off, during taking that time off, it was like I really just couldn't pinpoint a schedule and trying to perfectly execute doing all that while dedicating so many hours of my day to my place of employment. And so as a result, I went 4 or 5 months without releasing a podcast episode. Then the week that I came home and the stay-at-home order was issued, I got back into releasing podcasts. And from that time, from March until now, I have, to my own horn, I have released some of my best episodes. I think that my episodes have been well planned. I think that my episodes have been well strategized, and the topics that I have covered have been topics that have been right up my alley. And so as a result of that, I went on a great stretch of podcasts and developing a podcast, executing each episode that I wanted, and then also, trying to be more engaged in my social media with the podcast. And all of that is a result of me being able to sit in one place and me being able to work at home. I'm not, traveling to work 1 hour and then traveling from work 1 hour while spending about 9 hours there and then getting at home and then trying to do whatever I have to do when I get home, but also not affect my sleep schedule. And so that was hard to do. But now that I'm in one place and I'm sitting at home, I'm able to keep my sleep schedule intact, still keep my physical health intact and work out, and still give you all this weekly dose of Speak My Peace podcast episodes. So I'm definitely grateful for that during this pandemic. I don't know how it's going to change once everything somewhat goes back to normal, but I do know that because of this pandemic, I have been able to deliver the best episodes to date of the Speak My Peace podcast. And so again, I'm grateful for that, and it's all about perspective. Last, before I get out of here, man, I just want to say that there have been people are going to be negligent. We've learned that from day one. People didn't take this serious, and now I don't know what day it is of the pandemic, but people are still not taking it serious. From day one, week one, people were out still, partying and having these large gatherings and going to clubs and going to bars, and people are still doing that to this day. And we're still battling. We're in the middle of a second wave right now. And so if there's one thing we should learn about coming out of this year is knowing knowing people's morals and ethics. I know I for sure have learned, and granted, I'm not the type of person out hanging around a lot of people, but I've learned for sure just watching people on social media on where people's morals and ethics are, putting, their loved ones, putting their family lives at risk just because of, they want to go to a party or want to go to a club and things like that. And I've definitely witnessed that from day one, just watching people on social media, and people are still doing it to this day. And I just can't quite grasp it. But I do know that moving forward, the type of people who I will deal with and won't deal with, just because I saw where your priorities were in the middle of a pandemic. And when you think about that, and you think about it's the mental state of those people who deal with things who do things like that and are that negligent, you also have to keep in mind, what can you get out of that friendship? What can you get out of that relationship with a person who priorities are that? And that's just one thing we have to think about going forward into the new year, because people have been reckless throughout this entire pandemic, and it has been shown. I know a lot of people who have taken advantage, and I'm not condemning people for traveling. If you travel, fine, as long as you're not putting people's lives at risk. And I'm fine with it. But there's people who I've never seen showcase them traveling on social media, who are now traveling on social media in the midst of this pandemic. Granted, they're taking advantage of the cheap flights due to the pandemic, which I'm for one am not mad at. I love me a cheap flight. But when you take advantage of a cheap flight and then you go to the place that you're going, and you're putting people's lives at risk just so that you can have a cheap thrill, it's very negligent and it's very ignorant of you as a person. But people don't care. People think that it's still okay to travel and still do these things. People are going to places. People are traveling to places to catch a plane to places just to go to bars and strip clubs and things like that. And just I don't understand it. It's not okay to do it at home, so it's definitely not okay to do it somewhere else, if that makes any sense. But this is where we are, and we've learned a lot about other people throughout this pandemic. Hell, I haven't seen people, and I don't know if it was joking. Again, it's hard to dictate the seriousness and someone's tone on social media, but I've seen people saying that they, want to be first in line for the vaccine just so they can get out again. And I read these. I've seen it on Facebook a couple of days ago, and I read the status like that. I'm just what is wrong with you? That is the purpose of the vaccine, from what I believe, is to protect people. Despite the vaccine being offered here in the United States, we're still going to be having to stay at home. We're still going to be dealing with the pandemic. It's not going to be safe to go outside until these hospital beds are emptier than they are now. A majority of these hospitals, especially here in California, are overcrowded. People are trying to be admitted to hospitals and are being turned away because there's just not space and there's not beds available for them. And so when I think about things like that, and I think about people saying that, you know, they want to get the vaccine just so they can go out again and go to the club and go to bars, and it's just like, where do your priorities lie, and what type of person are you? What is it about the nightlife that is calling you that you're so addicted to it? And it's like, it's nothing about that life that is so addicting that you should be rushing to get a vaccine just so that you can go do it again, further putting people at risk. People are negligent. That's really all I have to say. Before I do get out of here, I want to say shout out to the frontline essential workers who have been putting their lives at risk throughout this entire pandemic, because that should not go unnoticed. I know it hasn't. A lot of people have sung their high praises throughout this entire time, but I want to take the time to sing my high praises. Huge shout out to y'all, because just as much as people like to sing praises for the troops who go overseas and invade these foreign countries and put their lives on the line to, quote unquote, for the freedom of the United States, the same thing can be said for these frontline workers, essential workers, who are putting their lives on the line to better the health of these COVID patients. You know, they're dedicating their lives, they're dedicating their days to trying to improve somebody's health while potentially putting their family at risk. You know, returning home and to their kids and to the spouses, and in some cases to their parents and grandparents, and potentially putting their lives at risk just so they can improve someone else's health. That should not go unnoticed. And I think moving forward, we should continue to sing those people praises, because the work that they've put in throughout this time has been monumental. And not even just in the hospital. When we think about people in the grocery stores, think about people working at Target, you know, they have to continue to go to these jobs because they have to make ends meet. I think if you were to ask them, like, you know, would you continue to do this if they paid you from home? I don't think that those people will show up, not because they're lazy or not because they get to get paid for not working, but because of the seriousness of this virus. They're literally risking their lives going to Target and being a cashier and not knowing what the consumer who's showing up to their register has done in the past 24 hours or 12 hours or 8 hours. That there is a risk. So huge shout out to all the essential workers all around, because every day they're putting their lives on the lines to either improve someone's health or better someone's life by just ringing them up at a cash register or helping to find a certain product or just having that face-to-face consumer interaction. Those people should not go unnoticed. And that's really all I have for this episode. This will be the last episode of 2020. I hope that you all have a happy holidays. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah. Yeah, man, I hope that you all take this time just to reflect on this year, and during that time and reflecting, do reach out to those that you love and express your gratitude for them. Do take the time to plan goals from next year to build on everything that occurred within this year, because that is important. As I get out of here, I want to also wish you all Happy New Year's. Probably won't speak to you all until the new year, so Happy New Year to you all as well. As we get out of here, my what to watch for this week, actually I'm gonna give you all two since it's the end of the year. My what to watches for this week is My Rainey's Black Bottom and Jingle, Jangle, both on Netflix. Once again, my what to watches for this week is My Rainey's Black Bottom and Jingle, Jangle, both are on Netflix. My best kept secret for this week, we're gonna go with young Kamaiyah, Big Step. Once again, my best kept secret for this week is Kamaiyah, Big Step. That's the Speak My Peace podcast for this week. I'm out.